What was the best thing the quiet kid has said or done in class? There was a guy named Phil in my high school psychology class who had pretty severe Asperger's. People were often mean to him because high school, but I genuinely liked him, and while he was very quiet, when he did speak, I thought he was hilarious. One day my teacher was jokingly giving me crap about protecting my sensitive information. I yelled out my social security number extremely quickly, almost in gibberish. Phil repeated it back verbatim and told me he was going to steal my identity. Then he put his cape on and ran out of the classroom. I hope Phil is doing well these days. He was awesome. Plot twist. He did steal your identity. You've been Phil this whole time. I was best friends with the quiet kid in high school. He spoke to me almost exclusively, and quietly enough that others rarely noticed. One day, the loud girl noticed. Oh my god, he talks? I haven't heard you talk since 6th grade. Without looking at her, he leans in real close and whispers something to me. He says he only talks to interesting people. I'll always remember this, partly for the ego boost he gave me, but also because of her reaction. Screw you. I hope I don't hear you for another 4 years. No need to worry about that. Korean kid in Canada, socially awkward, didn't speak English very well, physically not coordinated playing any sport, even running. That was until we were on a field trip and at lunch we went to her place with Dance Revolution. It was like the videos, playing on both pads, hands on railings, blasting the game to oblivion, setting high scores only to beat them. He had the entire leaderboard before we left. First time I saw him smile. One of the most impressive things I have ever seen. This is so wholesome, OMG. My friend decided he hated the quiet weird kid. He wasn't super quiet, but he didn't have any friends. One day my friend kept throwing those tiny Chips Ahoy cookies at the back of the quiet kid's head who was sitting by himself at lunch. Quiet kid picked up one of the cookies, stood over my sitting friend, and smashed the crap out of that cookie on my friend's head. It was amazing. Scene. Biology. Teacher. Now even though clones are the same genetically, they may come out differently. If we clone James here, his clone might have more access to. Quiet kid. Friends. Teacher doesn't even argue and just looks sadly at the kid. Not as extreme as others, but still completely unexpected. Not in school, but I teach middle to high school kids, 13-17, how to umpire baseball games. There was one kid, 13 years old, who was very quiet, reserved and shy, and I thought, this is not the vocation for him. A week later I swing by the field to evaluate him and see if I can help him with anything. I arrived about 5 minutes after the game started and I could hear loud, confident and definitive calls coming from this kid. I was floored. His mom came up to me and said that becoming an umpire has completely changed his personality. This is such a happy little story. I'm so glad he found a hobby that helped him flourish. 6th grade science class. Teacher was out of the room and we were fricking around with hot plates. While messing around, one of my classmates burns his hand pretty bad on a hot plate and has to go to the nurse. Right after he leaves the room, quiet kid enters and casually says, "Smells like burnt flesh in here," and just sits down like it was nothing. Everyone turned and just stared at him. 7th grade. New kid named Nick started school halfway through the year. He sat next to me in English class and didn't say anything ever. One day, we were reading poems out loud and critiquing each other. One sorry fellow read his, and every line started with, "If I was a bird. If I was a bird, I'd live in a tree. If I was a bird, I'd fly to school. If I was a bird." A few people offered polite criticism. The teacher called on Nick for his opinion, and he said, "If I was a bird, I'd poop on all of you." He got kicked out of class and I still laugh every time I think about it. We became friends and he was actually a pretty nice guy. I think he just couldn't resist making that joke. This is the first comment that made me laugh out loud, and I don't really know why. There was a girl who went the entirety of middle school never speaking a word unless absolutely necessary. One day the class was being rowdy while the teacher was out of the room and in the raspiest, deepest voice ever yelled, "Shut up." We all shut up. I immediately imagined this girl to look like a female Chester Bennington. I remember going to junior high in this small hick town in Texas while I was on probation. That's a long story. Had a quiet kid who was actually really popular. Not bullied at all like most quiet kids. Anyway, I was new, had only been going to the school for about a month when this happened. We had a substitute teacher for one of our classes. She was doing a quick roll call and got to his name, Pargus. She said that's an interesting and beautiful name. What does it mean? He said lice. There was dead silence and confused looks all around. This kid had been going to this school since kindergarten. Small town. And had always gone by Pargus, which was his nickname. Nobody had a freaking clue what it meant, let alone that it was his real name. All of his paperwork at the school had to be updated and everything. I thought it was hilarious. I was very quiet too, but instead of getting bullied, my classmates would always try to start a conversation and were overall very nice to me. Beat the crap out of the kid that kept poking, touching, slapping at him. I think it was around the 7th time he said, "Dude, please stop," before the blood came. There was a fly in the room. He threw his pencil straight up and freaking skewered the fly and the pencil got stuck in the ceiling. It was those really weak plaster tile things, but it was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I wish I could go back in time and record it. I probably wouldn't believe this, but my brother hit a fly with a rubber band while it was flying. The chances are low. Must have been a really sharp pencil. He must have practiced. Good job, fly impaling kid. This one kid in high school said he wanted to go to Harvard, and this quiet dude at the back of the class said, "Harvard? Number. Stewart's maybe." Stewart's is our local cosmetology school. Whole class lost it. Around here Stewart's is a convenience store chain, so that would have been extra brutal. Classmates used to throw crumpled paper balls at her every day because they knew she wouldn't react. One day she started picking them up, spitting on them, and throwing them back. The teacher just smiled and watched. The teacher was no nonsense and regularly yelled at and gave detention to those shit kiker kids. But, being shit kikers, none of that ever stopped them. So when quiet girl decided to step up, he just let her do her thing. I like her. One girl screamed, "I just wanted to frick randomly in class." Sell drugs. He was the typical quiet, good kid who always made good grades. He was also the best drug dealer at our school. Since all the teachers saw him as this innocent angel, he never once got caught. Can confirm, if you're innocent looking and quiet, you can be the best drug dealer ever. The quiet kid in my class was sorta bullied by this kid who had a cleft chin. One day the cleft chin guy insulted the quiet kid, and the quiet kid came back with the insult, "Is your mouth so filthy because someone fricked you in the chin?" It was 6th grade and the whole table, we were seated as groups, busted out laughing. It was a dirty joke, so check, and it was aimed at a bully, double check. He became known as the chin fricked kid, which was hilarious to us 6th graders. If only I could be half as savage as that 6th grader even now. My friend was the quiet kid in high school drafting class. Back when drafting was done on paper, there was another kid harassing him from across the room. He took his T-square, about 2 feet long, made of wood, sharp edges, and whipped it across the room, hitting his harasser square on the side of the head. The resulting head wound required several stitches. I guess that set him straight. When I was a kid I was obsessed with The Simpsons, and one day I kept narrating everything in the Duffman voice. Duffman says, "Oh yeah, etc." Eventually the quiet kid next to me stood up and screamed, "Shut the frick up. I don't give a frick what the Duffman says." He got in trouble and I didn't, cause the teacher hadn't heard any of my Duffman quotes. I still think about him sometimes. I'm sorry man, I was being so annoying and you didn't deserve to get in trouble. A girl that used to sleep during class went to the director office because there was too much noise in our philosophy lecture. Next class right after she started sleeping and the quiet kid woke her up and warned her he wasn't going to let her sleep ever again. Legit. Because I care about my peers and don't want you to fail. They're a wholesome quiet kid. My wife told me of a really quiet kid in her class. No one ever heard him speak because he has some sort of mental thing and the teacher knew not to call on him. The last week of school this kid finally speaks. 100% British. This is in the cornfields of the Midwest. I was a British kid that moved to Tucson, Arizona and put in 3rd grade. I was asked by multiple people at the time why I talked so funny. I just learned to not talk at all. The culture change was shocking enough for me anyway, from English school to American school. I was in a marketing class once and the instructor put up a slide with advertisements for Axe body spray. He asked the class, what do you think this product is for, and the quiet guy piped up and said birth control. We're in health class, on the topic of domestic abuse. Somehow the subject turns to how Britney Spears received backlash for abusing her kids. Kid in the back says, probably because she hit her baby one more time. We had a kid at our high school who refused to speak for the entirety of our high school career, even if a teacher called on him. The day we graduated he spoke for the first time. His reasoning for his 4 years of silence was just because I could. Absolute madman. He took a frozen pizza out of his bag and threw it at a window, shattering it. Italy in World War II. My sister told me about a quiet guy that asked to go to the bathroom but the teacher refused and so just stood up and pee himself in class. Ultimate power move. Quiet kid in my theater class. They're for the crew type jobs. Our teacher asks us questions daily, and the day's question was, what's your favorite Easter candy? Or normal candy if you don't celebrate? One kid said chocolate bunnies, and the teacher asked what they liked it filled with. Kids chimed in with stuff like peanut butter or marshmallow cream, but this girl just says organs, in the most monotone voice imaginable. Honestly, I expect nothing less than organs from high school theater kids. That crap is something else. A little short blonde girl with a really high-pitched voice read a poem she wrote about how death is unescapable and everyone will die. The quiet and somewhat creepy kid in my class for poetry came with an erotic one about ocular penetration. It was actually quite poetic, inserting metaphors about how ocular physical intimacy pierces the window to the soul and allows one afterwards to look directly into it. Geometry teacher was bragging about how well he drew circles and going on about how one day he would draw a perfect circle. He asked us what would happen if he drew a perfect circle. My friend, a sweet, quiet girl says rather loudly, you die. Can't really remember the reaction of the class, but I laughed and the teacher looked totally crushed. Makes sense since you can't draw a prefix circle. The dorky short pudgy kid was being bullied by the really popular class jock. Dork rushed the jock, pulled his shirt over his head and began beating him pretty good hockey style. The jock actually transferred schools the next year. Not sure if it was because of that or what, but he wasn't popular anymore. Yeah, being a bully only really works if everyone is afraid of you. You get your crap kicked in by your victim. You lost any respect your behavior gave you. Some pudgy girl was insulting a quiet kid at lunch and said he was a trash can because all his ideas were garbage. He told her she must be a refrigerator because she seems like where all the food goes. Not a crazy thing but a bit of a Mad Lib moment. This kid in my class was really short, and one day this big fat kid from a grade above was teasing him. Fat kid says, you're the size of my leg. Little guy goes, you're like the size of my house. We about lost it. In the last semester of senior year, we were assigned a pass-fail essay. If we made any grammatical, stylistic, or formatting mistake, we would fail. It was traditional for the seniors of each year to write and bomb said essay, and the teachers would never stop gloating about how impossible it was. The quiet kid in my class wrote a perfect essay. Smart, nerdy, quiet kid in the front of class, always answered questions correctly when called on. One day the teacher calls on him and before he even answers the teacher just lazily says correct and turns back around to write on the board. The second the teacher turns around, the quiet kid just rockets his pencil upward into the ceiling like an arrow. The teacher doesn't notice. It was just such a sudden, unexpected act of rebellion from the quiet kid that never said anything. The whole class saw it and by the time the teacher turned around the quiet kid was playing it cool as ice and taking notes again. The teacher doesn't notice. Finally the teacher turns around again to ask another question and the entire class is trying not to laugh and everyone is trying not to look at the pencil stuck into the ceiling. The teacher still doesn't notice. A couple of people laugh, and every time the teacher asked what is so funny the situation became even more hilarious. Finally the teacher turns around again and continues the lesson, completely oblivious. It was boring math class and it was the funniest thing that happened all year. Reminds me of when we passed around a note that said, see, we should all drop our pencils at exactly 12 o'clock. Even the really good kids didn't tattle, and the sub was like WTF. Not in class, But I once had a co-worker who was quiet and adorable and generally kept to herself. She overheard me call another co-worker a tea waffle, to which she responded, "Tea waffles. Sounds delicious." Professor was talking about the personalities of different cities and says something like, "Some cities have a lot of personality and talk a lot. Some cities whisper, and some cities don't seem to be saying anything at all." At which point this quiet kid who had never uttered a word says, almost under his breath, "Topeka." That was all. Kid had some feelings about Topeka, Kansas. It's hot in Topeka. We were having a class discussion or game or something, and needed to come up with hypothetical situations for some reason. This was 2013, so the band One Direction was extremely popular with some, and hated by the others. Teacher, name a place you'd never find One Direction. Class gets quiet for a split second. The same moment quiet kid murmurs, "The Grammys." It was almost too perfect, made more perfect by the fact that it was obviously just supposed to be to himself. What a legend. I saw him jotting some stuff down in a little black book. Me, "What are you writing?" Him, blank stare, "I'm adding you to my death list." This was the early 90s and we would chat from time to time, so it never registered as anything but a dry AF joke. The quiet girl in my class roasts me all the time, like, she's super shy and all, but if it comes to me, she goes all out. Maybe she's into you. I'm tired of this crap while unzipping his backpack. Takes out pillow, goes to sleep. In college my friend Harry was the quiet kid, but one day, in the dead silence he randomly said, "Oh, if I were a turtle." Turtles are the superior form of life. One kid would be able to have super quiet phone conversations with his mom during class. Everyone right next to him would know he was on the phone, but the teacher and the rest of the class had no idea. Granted, these weren't long convos, but they were still hilarious to witness. There was a quiet kid in my class and he always got up 5 minutes before class ended every day, like to the exact second. One day he got up 20 minutes before class and I crap you not, the whole class gasped. When the teacher asked him where he was going, he responded, "I need to go check my blood sugar a little earlier today because I'm going home early to visit Disney." The kid was so quiet, no one even knew he was diabetic. He didn't mention it ever. Lol. Kid was so quiet, no one even knew he was diabetic. He didn't mention it ever. Lol. A lot of us don't like to bring it up. People ask annoying questions, try to stop you from eating things, or explain how their uncle's brother's cousin's former roommate totally cured it with kale chips or whatever, and we'd just rather not deal with that. I never bring it up unless it's immediately relevant. Mean girl told quiet friend she was going to beat her up in the parking lot the next morning. Half jokingly I said, "Grab that bee by the hair and feed her some uppercuts." Next morning I pull in and lo and behold she's got the half conscious mean girl by the hair and is absolutely destroying her. Realized I never told her when to stop and jumped out of the car and broke it up. Kind of like Forrest Gump playing football. Quiet kid was in my friendship group at school and even then, I don't think I ever heard him speak. A nice guy still, somehow, I think. Despite his total not speaking, there are two things he did that stand out that I remember about him to this day. Firstly, one day, he just straight up fainted in a science class. Doesn't appear to have been anything in said class that would have triggered it. Unfortunately our labs had those high stools so it was quite a way. The second thing was at a lunchtime. We were at our usual spot by the benches, doing whatever we always did, and at some point we realize he is holding a handful of screws and nuts. After a minute we realized he'd taken all the screws and nuts out of one of the picnic benches, but it was still totally intact. We have zero idea why, but it was outstanding work, especially as we didn't know he was doing until he did it. Laughing, but realizing we would get our asses handed to us if anyone found out, we tried to figure out next steps. So of course some idiot leans on the bench, instantly flat packing it in one fluid motion, just as the caretaker walks past. Oh, I remember what doing whatever we always did was, how high can you throw an apple at a brick wall and get some of it to remain on the wall? This was outside in England so it rained it all away pretty quick. Quiet kid in summer school was being constantly bullied by the louder shat kid behind him. A shat calls the quiet kid a very uncool name, without missing a beat, and in the flash of a second kid spins, sticks a pencil completely through the guy's hand and sits back frontways. It was so quick we were not even sure it happened, except for the pencil stuck in the other guy's hand and the screaming and blood. Halloween. One of the hottest girls comes in late, dressed in all white, club attire, white leggings, white top. Again it's Halloween. Class is dead silent because she's late. Quiet kid, what the frick are you supposed to be? A straw? Whole class, teacher included, busts out laughing. I've never seen her embarrassed. It was deserved. You have been visited by the sniper kit. A good aim and also accuracy will come your way if you comment snipe well. Kit a like and subscribe, you magnificent person.